from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome. This is David Haivri bringing you a Hebrew in the Heartland on Israel News Talk Radio. BDS. BDS is a movement that calls on boycotting Israeli products in order to pressure Israel to remove itself from Judea and Samaria. Well, what a sweet movement. They have cooperation, they have organizations, they have governments around the world who are participating, supporting their cause, funding this operation, targeting Israeli businesses. Well, this week, the Shomron Regional Council initiated a conference at the European Union, in the Parliament of the European Union in Brussels. And the conference was attended by leaders, both Jewish and Arab, both Israelis and non-Israeli Palestinians. And we're going to be speaking with Mr. Mudar Zahran, who is the secretary of the Jordanian/Palestinian movement who wish to live in peace with Israel. And he spoke at this conference. You should definitely go on to Facebook and see Mr. Mudar Zahran's speech there. But today we're going to be speaking with Mudar Zahran and hearing about the conference and about his agenda to foster peace between Israel and the Palestinian people in their own country on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And sometimes he has been mocked by others as being not having a very serious platform. But remarkably, currently we hear the American administration, President Trump, suggesting ideas that are very similar to those same ideas that Mudar Zahran has been promoting for all of these years. Bringing you a Hebrew in the Heartland on Israel News Talk Radio. We're going to have a very exciting show today, working on confronting BDS. BDS is the movement that is calling on the boycott of Israeli products, particularly from Judea and Samaria, in order to close down the Israeli factories in Judea and Samaria. This week there was a major conference at the European Union of Jews and Arabs from Judea and Samaria, speaking in favor of economical cooperation here in the heartland of Israel. All right, everyone, today we are speaking with Mudar Zahran, who is in London. He is actually a Jordanian/Palestinian leader who is in exile in London. He's been there for a couple of years. The King of Jordan does not approve of Mudar Zahran and his message. And Mudar was just sharing his message at a conference in the European Union. So, Mudar, welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
Mudar, I would love for you to tell our listeners about the conference. What was the conference all about? And then I'm going to ask you about your own presentation there.
The conference brought together a group of Palestinian Arabs and Jews from the Shomron to tell the untold stories that the European Union and the European Parliament never hears about. Stories of coexistence and cooperation, and stories that confirm that both sides actually are not interested in the conflict as the mission that many in the European Union envisions it to be. We were there to make them hear from the horse's mouth and tell them that enough is enough.
So the European Union, who are invested very heavily in establishing the Palestinian Authority, they provide millions and millions of euro grants to the Palestinian Authority. They've been doing this for the past 25 years, and they think that they know all about what is good for the Palestinians, and they imagine that the Jewish existence and the Israeli existence in Judea and Samaria, or as they call it, the West Bank, they imagine this is negative. And here, you, together with other Arab speakers, came together at the European Union to tell them what?
Well, the message was very clear. First of all, their quest to change the status quo has not been fruitful, and has been very damaging to both sides of the equation, us and the Israelis. The fact that Europe is still contesting Israel's presence in certain areas is quite interesting because, they are refusing to let go of history, despite the fact that the very country we're speaking at, Belgium, does have a history of territorial issues with the Netherlands. So they should not project what they cannot do into us. And we were there to basically tell them that Europe has to understand that it's barking the wrong tree when it comes to both of us. 500,000 Palestinian Arabs work every day in Israeli settlements, homes, and elsewhere, with no incidents except for minor ones. 6,000 Jordanians cross the southern borders every day to work in Israeli hotels and restaurants in Eilat in the south. We want to move on, and they need to understand that they are being an obstacle at the moment by financing and supporting the wrong parties.
Say that, please explain again. Who are you saying is the obstacle to peace?
The European Union's policies towards both Israel and the Palestinian Jordanian people constitutes an obstruction to peace, knowingly or unknowingly. They are supporting the wrong party. First of all, they're supporting the tyrannical, corrupt Palestinian Authority and the dictatorship in the Hashemite Kingdom, which occupies 78% of historical Palestine. The Hashemites are occupiers, and they treat us very badly. The Palestinian Authority is an illegitimate creation that was never elected, never chosen by the people. There was never a referendum about the Palestinian Authority. What's very interesting is they all are picking and choosing what happens to us without them asking us at all what should happen. We no longer believe, most Palestinians and Jordanians no longer believe in the mythical conflict or the mythical values which were established by the Hashemite Kingdom in particular, the advocates of liberating Palestine, fighting the Jews, feeding the Jews to the fish. These are all slogans created by Nasser of Egypt, King Hussein, and Yasser Arafat. All three men are gone. All three men have had a very bad history with people, and all three men are not exactly whom you can call heroes. It's time to move on. Let me just say that most Jordanians and Palestinians say in secret what we said in public at the European Parliament yesterday. We are not interested in the Palestinian Authority keeping or taking any more land. We have had enough with them. We are not interested in remaining as refugees in Jordan. And also, there was another voice to be heard, the voice of what many call the Bedouin Jordanians. They're not all Bedouins, but they are the native Jordanians, and they also want a change where they have equal rights. This is something that's never addressed by the European Union. And while they are chasing Israel, issuing laws against Israel, and boycotting Israel, they never utter a single word about either the Palestinian Authority or the dictatorial regime in Jordan, which constitutes a deliberate act of hypocrisy. In addition, they must understand that our interest is with Israel. Israel's interest is ours, and so is our interest is Israel's interest. Whenever we did well, Israel did well. Whenever Israel does well, we do well. So they're not either that they simply don't know, or they either do it on purpose. And in both cases, it's not being good to us, and they must stop. And actually, I delivered a very, very clear warning to them yesterday. Things are changing very fast. The Palestinian Authority, I don't think, would survive beyond Abbas. Abbas, in my opinion, is the last Palestinian Authority's head with factual powers. And the Hashemite kingdom will never last beyond this current king. In fact, he's very contested at the moment, with protests sweeping across Jordan. With this being the situation, change is around the corner, and either the European Union will have to accept them or become out of the game. Basically, they either have to put up or shut up, either to become a partner or stay out of it. And that was my clear message to them yesterday. They have to let both our people go. Again, I told them, let our people go.
Mudar Zahran, again for our listeners who are tuning in now, Mudar Zahran is a Jordanian Palestinian leader who lives in exile because he is an opposition to the current king of the Hashemite kingdom in Jordan. And he preaches for peace and coexistence with Israel. Mudar, I'd like to touch on some of the points, the many points that you made in your presentation and that you just repeated here in this interview. First, I'd like to start at the beginning. You mentioned Egyptian President, past Egyptian President Abdullah Nasser, who came up with the Pan-Arabism concept of banning all of the Arabs together in a joint mission to throw the Jewish people in the sea. And basically you're saying that the Pan-Arabism is a failed concept that our people are not interested in today. Is that correct?
Nobody buys this anymore. People have changed. First of all, because we have failed so many times. This so-called leaders delivered false promises, and each and every one of them brought a catastrophic event that we still have to endure the results. Pan-Arabism with Nasser destroyed Egypt's economy, engaged Egypt in fruitless wars, and in the name of war against the Jews, oppressed, killed, imprisoned the Egyptian people. Nasser was one of the greatest human rights violators of all time. So was Saddam Hussein, also promised to destroy Israel. So was Gaddafi, that was a sworn enemy of Israel.
Imach Shemam, they should all rot in hell. Mudar Zahran, we're going to be taking a short commercial break, so hang in there with us and come right back after this break. Welcome back, everyone. This is David Hayivri, bringing you a Hebrew in the Heartland on Israel News Talk Radio. Before the commercial break, we were speaking with Mudar Zahran, a Jordanian Palestinian leader who just spoke at the European Union, and he was telling us about the death of the Pan-Arabism. The Abdullah Nasser, Egyptian president, had this idea of bringing together all of the Arabs to push the Jews into the sea, and that is no longer really a serious theme in the Arab world. We'll hear more about this from Mudar.
So was Hafiz Assad, and so remains the Palestinian Authority and the Hashemite Kingdom, whose official and on record media, in addition to public and official statements by the king's very own officials and the king himself, they're always promising to liberate Palestine. And look at what we have. We've been impoverished, tortured, imprisoned, all in the name of liberating Palestine from the Jews. We've had enough. Also, the young generation, including the Palestinian Arabs in Israel and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, in the age of social media, they look around, they search, and they see how other people live. People are no longer stupid and uninformed. So the Arab dictators are playing by the old rules. Things have changed. Let me assure the listeners, most, except for a very small minority. Most Palestinian Arabs and Jordanians do not wish to fight Israel. They just cannot say it publicly. And well, a good evidence of that is how there was, no recent intifadas. 1987, you would look at, at the TV screen and you would see 50, 20,000 people throwing rocks and cocktail bombs at the IDF. 2000, 2001, you'd see similar numbers. Right now, the biggest Hamas was able to collect last Friday in Gaza to attack the fence was 250 people, and the photos are there. People have had enough, and the ones who are moving right now are unfortunately being generously financed by the European Union and by some Arab states like Qatar, Jordan, and Turkey.
But by the way, I wanted to mention that some Palestinian business leaders who wished to attend the conference that you spoke at the European Union had to cancel their appearance because they were threatened in the Palestinian Authority for speaking publicly in favor of this cooperation and coexistence and peaceful existence with the Jewish people in Judea and Samaria.
May this be the answer to many Israelis who keep saying, how come we don't hear from a lot of Palestinians about peace, and if they want peace, how come they never speak about it, and where are the pro-peace protests? Well, if you mention peace, or even if you intend to speak about peace, you end up in jail, you end up getting tortured, or your business destroyed, or they might set your business on fire. And I have many personal friends from the territories who were actually attacked because of their simple statements about peace. So this is why we have had enough. The Palestinian Authority brought poverty, brought tyranny, corruption, lack of services, no water supply. Most people don't realize that Arab villages and towns in the West Bank don't get any regular water supply. When I'm in Bethlehem, I have to purchase the water for quite very expensive money. We get water tankers. Before that, when Israel was there, we never had a water problem. We never had health problems. We never had civil services problems. We all managed to work through Israel and get pensions. So we are all set. We were all set for life. We were able to export our products to Israel. Gaza, some Gazan farmers used to thrive on Valentine's Day because they would export their flowers. The flower industry in Gaza used to be huge, and the Arab flower industry, they would export it to Israel, and the Israelis would immediately export it to Europe. So they would one strike of the Valentine's Day would make the whole year good for a Gazan farmer. This is all gone. This is all history. We have had enough. We are not animals. We don't have any more livelihoods. We don't have any sources of income. We cannot even speak our minds. We are afraid to like a post on Facebook because the Palestinian Authority would put us in jail. Same in Jordan. And Jordan is a key partner to our misery, in addition to the fact that you can never, ever create a distinction between the Palestinians and the Jordanians. Both names, both ethnicities, if you wish to call them that, this is like making a difference between a Jew in Tel Aviv and a Jew in Shechem, or a Jew in somewhere in the north. There's no difference. It's a whole collective case of misery, which we've had enough of. Now, what you need to know is that the average Palestinian thinks exactly like that right now. You go to social media, and despite the oppression, you still see a lot of Palestinians who dare to speak against the authority and mention that the good old days were good. My last visit to the West Bank lasted for 90 days, and during that time, I can assure you, I've met people who are 70-something years old. I've met youngsters. A lot of them, all of them, actually, all agreed that they wish Israel would just return.
Mudar Zahran, I would like to ask you, you know that I lead many informational tours in the Samaria, in Judea and Samaria, in the Shomron, for influencers who visit from around the world who are unaware of the realities on the ground. One of the things that we typically do on this tour is actually visit the factories in the Barkan Industrial Park, those same factories that are being targeted by the BDS and the factories whose products are being labeled by the European Union as being manufactured in the settlements in order to deter people from purchasing these products. But I wanted to ask you about another subject on our informational tour. I take my guests to Mount Gerizim, where we can look over the city of Shechem. You might know the city by the name of Nablus.
Yeah.
And in Shechem, Nablus, there are 3 UN-administered refugee camps. There is Balata, Askar, and Rafadia. And we can see 2 of them from Mount Gerizim. We cannot enter the city of Shechem, Nablus, because it's Area A. It's forbidden for Jewish people to enter the Palestinian Authority. And when we look from the top of the mountain and see the different areas in the city of Nablus, we see the regular city, and then we see the refugee camps. And it's very hard for us to understand why within the Area A, the area that's under the full domain of the Palestinian Authority for over 25 years, that they still refuse to resettle the refugees who live within their domain. Can you give us can you enlighten us on this situation?
Basically, the Palestinian Authority, the Hashemite Kingdom, the PLO, since the conflict's inception, they all thrive on the survival of the conflict. The purpose is not to find, many assume that, the Palestinian Authority or the King of Jordan would love to just end this with them winning and taking everything. In fact, it's not the case. In fact, they want the conflict to continue for as long as possible, because this is how they secure their bread and butter. The more the conflict thrives, the more the conflict continues, the more money is pouring in, the more foreign aid is pouring in, and the more prominence they get. Someone like who's theoretically or actually a foreign leader like the King of Jordan, whenever he wants any global prominence, he keeps mentioning Palestine to the Western media and the Palestinian human rights, which is basically an oxymoron just to be mentioned by a Hashemite king. Same goes for Abbas. Abbas has been more to the White House in his lifetime than any existing leader in the world. In a normal setup, if there was no conflict, he'd probably be lucky to get to the White House once every 5 years. This is how they secure the funding. This is how they thrive. This is how they have their mansions in Europe, their bank accounts, and even the bank accounts they have in Israel. Whenever you go, when you depart in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria on Friday evening, when I go to Tel Aviv, I would see those fancy armored limousines for the Palestinian Authority officials on the highway. They spend the weekend in Tel Aviv while we are starving in the West Bank. And how do you secure all of that to them if the conflict was solved tomorrow morning? They have been playing the game very well, and I'm afraid to say that the European Union has been also playing the game with them, not because the European Union is ignorant or uninformed. They think the only leverage they can get in the area is to highlight the Israeli-Arab conflict.
Mudar, just hang on. We need to take another commercial break, but don't go away. We need you after the break. Everyone, don't go away. hear this commercial, and we will be right back with Mudar Zahran.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
And we are back with Mudar Zahran. Mudar, tell us, why is Mogherini, the foreign secretary for the European Union, why is she so set against Israel?
On the other hand, I don't know how many times was she ever seen Israeli officials. She's not doing that because she's uninformed. She's not doing that because she doesn't know. She's doing that because they know that they want the conflict to continue so they can leverage their presence in the Middle East. They finance the torture and murderous machine of both the Palestinian Authority and the Hashemite Kingdom. And both machines, the police machines, they control the Palestinians and Jordanians, whom, ironically, the European Union claims to love the most. So this was our message yesterday. This is going to change. The status quo is going to change, and the European Union will find itself left out and actually hated by both the new leadership and the people. So they better get their act together and move forward. There's no other option.
Mudar, you have been speaking for years of this cooperation between Israel and Jordan, preaching that Jordan is Palestine. It's the solution for the Palestinian people who want a state. The majority of the residents of Jordan are actually Palestinians. Jordan is a state that is reliant on support from the United States. And if it were to live in a good cooperation with Israel, Israel could boost the economy of Jordan by providing workplaces for Jordanians in Jordan and so forth. Many people have mocked your proposal for years, but now there's a huge development with the messages coming from the Trump administration regarding some type of confederacy. What are your feelings about these developments?
Well, it's simply because President Trump is a non-establishment leader. He's also a very successful and intelligent builder who knows how to execute a business plan from A to Z. So he looks from the outside into the inside, and he sees what's right and what's wrong. This very brilliant U.S. leader simply realizes what everyone knows, which is the fact that even if there was a Palestinian state to be inside the West Bank, it still will need a geographic, economic, and political outlet in Jordan. And what we are preaching, the president's very determined to execute a peace plan, and his official plan so far has not been announced, but it seems that from what Abbas just announced about the Confederacy, that he realizes that Jordan should be involved. Well, the Jordanian government immediately announced that they refuse any such confederacy or any such solution, simply because they want the conflict to go on. Our vision is very clear. We want a majority's rule in Jordan, a majority as in both Jordanians and Palestinians ruling, because there's no difference. And the minority is the Hashemite family of 82 individuals. We simply want them to pick their stuff and leave. And they already have, but that's a different issue. And the Jordanian citizens in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, every single Palestinian in the West Bank already holds a Jordanian passport. Most people don't realize that they are Jordanian citizens. People have even even seen some so-called experts claiming that they no longer have Jordanian passports. Well, they all do hold Jordanian passports, in case you didn't know, and those are our citizens. Okay, they will remain residents of Israel, but they will be our citizens. Israel is not interested in issuing death certificates, marriage decrees, business licenses to those people. So people in Area A will have a civil administration that's governed by Jordan. The sovereignty over soil will be Israeli. The Palestinian Authority will have no place in that part of the world, and it's gonna already phase itself out after Abbas is gone. And Abbas has had very serious health problems lately. Basically, stomach cancer or some sort of cancer in his stomach intestines. And so he's an old man, either way. He's not going to live forever. So we're going to witness the demise of the Palestinian Authority. And unfortunately, we're looking at potential internal conflict, armed conflict between Palestinian PLO factions themselves. And let's just hope they don't create a lot of mess on their way out. They can go back to Tunis. They're all billionaires, at least millionaires. They can return to Tunis or to France, which is their, country of choice when it comes to buying their mansions abroad. They've had enough. They've had their good share of both money and blood, and it's time for them to go out. This is like a train. You can't stand in front of a train. This is coming, whether you like it or not. And this is where the European Union has to understand, okay, it's either that they ride the train or be dumb enough to stand in front of it. It's up to them.
Mudar, you are a visionary, you're a man of peace, you're a leader of your community, of the Jordanian Palestinians, and you wish to live in peace with the people of Israel. You've been preaching this message of peace for so many years, and forced to live in exile in a foreign country. And I ask you, is there hope? Are you optimistic?
I am confident that this will materialize in the very foreseen future. Times have changed. Obama was our greatest obstacle, and he's gone. Thanks God, Baruch Hashem, Alhamdulillah. And now we have the right man in the White House. He wants peace. He doesn't advocate Jordan as Palestine, nor do we. We don't advocate that. We're advocating a practical solution in which Jordan is involved and where Israel's sovereignty is restored. Inshallah, I see this happening in the foreseen future. I don't have an iota of doubt.
Before we go, I'm sure that our listeners would like to hear your opinion. There's a lot of talk and even opposition to the quest of Jewish people to pray at the holy place on the Temple Mount. And many excuse Israel's forbidding Jewish people from praying on the Temple Mount in some agreement that Israel has with the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. How do you feel about Jewish people who wish to pray at the holy place?
I know what I am. I come from a very religious Muslim family. I am a practicing and a proud Muslim myself. The laws of Islam, Sharia, dictate that banning a faithful person of any faith to pray is an ultimate sin. This is stated in the Quran. When it comes to Jews are monotheists. They worship the same God we worship. According to the Quran, the description of the Almighty God is the God of the children of Israel. It's quoted on what Pharaoh said in the Quran, that now I believe in the God of the children of Israel. Of course, when he began drowning. So we worship the same one and only God. We have we share 90% of the laws and the 613 laws. You find most of them in Islam. Regardless of the reason, the fact is we share the same religious values. It is against Islam, against the teachings of Islam, to prevent a Jew from praying. It's against God. And it also is against the values of Muhammad, because Muhammad allowed the Christians who came to argue with him, he allowed them to pray inside a mosque. And those people were not praying to one almighty God. They were praying to the Trinity. So I am not exactly sure why we won't allow Jews to practice their religion if they're praying to the same God. The love for Jerusalem should unite us, bring us together. The love for Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the same term in Arabic, Beit HaMikdash, Beit al-Maqdis, should unite us, not divide us. I cannot see a problem with a Jew praying to my God. And ironically, the Jewish prayers and the Muslim prayers are even similar. We need a new chapter, but we have the monkey in the middle. The monkey in the middle is the Hashemite kingdom, which is still, controlling the Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, what does the Hashemite kingdom have to do with it? Very, very strange that this situation still persists. Either way, this is not for me to decide or for you to decide. This is for the locals of Jerusalem. The Waqf should be delivered to trusted elders of the Arab locals in Jerusalem who could coordinate with the Jews in Jerusalem towards a better agreement. Either way, the Jews already pray at a certain part of the mosque called the Haram al-Sharif, and we could always create a more humane and more precious, accepted agreement. The status quo cannot be. So this is for sure.
Mudar Zahran, a spokesperson for the Jordanian Palestinians, speaking for peace with the Jewish people in Israel, peace and coexistence. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, and God bless.